I still remember the smell of flowers that day. Not the good kind. Not the ones you keep in a vase to brighten the room. No. The kind they place on coffins. White lilies. Heavy, sweet, and suffocating. I had just come home from the funeral. My husband, Robert, had been laid to rest only 3 hours earlier. And I remember walking through that front door with my chest feeling like someone had carved a hollow space inside me. My hands were still trembling from holding the shovel when they asked me to throw the first handful of dirt. I didn't want to. I didn't want to let go. But everyone was watching. My daughter, Laura, her husband, Ethan, my grandson, Eli. They were all there, standing beside me. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. But in truth, I think I was already alone. When I stepped into the house that day, everything felt strange. The quiet, the air, the way the light hit the empty sofa where Robert used to sit. I thought, maybe I'd find some comfort here. Maybe a small sign that I wasn't completely invisible. And then, I saw it. A cream-colored envelope sitting neatly on the dining table. It looked important. Maybe someone had left a card. A kind word. Maybe a neighbor. I set down my purse, wiped my eyes, and picked it up. It was heavy. Formal. For one hopeful second, I thought it might say, "We're thinking of you." But when I opened it, my heart stopped. It wasn't a condolence card. It wasn't kindness. It was an invoice. Typed. Precise. Cold. And it said, "Since you'll be staying indefinitely, Ethan and I thought it's fair for you to contribute to the household. Rent, $750. Utilities, $200. Groceries, $100. Due on the 1st of every month." I just stared at it. For so long that my eyes blurred. My own daughter, my only child, had written me a bill. You know, when you're young, you never imagine this kind of pain. You think heartbreak comes from losing love, or from death. But the deepest heartbreak, the kind that never heals, comes from your own blood forgetting who you are. I sat down at the table, letter in hand, and I could hear Robert's voice in my head. "You worry too much, Ellie. Laura would never hurt you." But she did. And I think, part of me had seen it coming. After Robert got sick, things changed between us. At first, Laura came around every weekend. She'd bring groceries, ask how he was doing, kiss his forehead, and promise she'd be back soon. But soon turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And then, just phone calls. Short ones. Rushed ones. "Sorry, Mom. Work's been insane. Ethan's got another project starting. I'll come by next weekend." But that weekend never came. The day Robert took his last breath, it was just me and the machines. I held his hand, felt his fingers go cold, and whispered, "It's okay, love. You can rest now." When the nurse covered his face, I remember thinking, I don't want to see tomorrow. But tomorrow came. And then came the silence. 11 days in the hospital. 11 days surrounded by white walls, stale air, and the sound of machines that only beeped for other people. No one visited. Not once. Not Laura. Not Ethan. Not even a call. The nurse had to order a cab to take me home when I was discharged. I was still sore from the surgery. My body ached, my legs shook, but I told myself, "It's fine, you'll see them soon, they'll be waiting for you." But when I arrived at their house, the one I helped them buy 5 years ago, there was no one waiting at the door. Just that envelope. I remember whispering to myself, "This must be a mistake." So when Laura walked in later that evening, I smiled the best I could and asked, "Honey, what is this?" I held up the letter. She looked at it, then at me and said, "Oh, you found it." "Yeah, Ethan and I talked about it. You're staying long term, right? We figured it's only fair." "Only fair." That's what she said. I asked quietly, "Fair?" She crossed her arms. Mom, we have bills. The mortgage, utilities, food. You know how expensive everything is now. I stared at her. Laura, I gave you the money for this house. She sighed, like she was tired of the conversation already. That was a gift, Mom. Don't make this awkward. We just want things to be clear. Clear. Like a contract. Like I was some stranger renting a room. And then Ethan walked in from the kitchen, beer in hand. It's nothing personal, Mrs. Hamilton, he said. We just need to be organized. Mrs. Hamilton. He used to call me Mom. Something broke in me right then. Something small and fragile that I didn't even know still existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the way she said, fair, the way he said, Mrs. Hamilton. And I kept thinking about that house. My house. 5 years ago, when Laura and Ethan couldn't get a loan, they came to me. They cried, begged, said it was their dream home. Robert and I emptied part of our savings. $25,000. We signed the documents together. It was supposed to be their start. And now, here I was, being asked to pay rent in the very house I'd helped them build. I got up, turned on the lamp, and stared at Robert's photo on the nightstand. His smile still gentle. His eyes kind. Why did you leave me? I whispered. I don't know how to do this without you. The tears didn't stop that night. Not once. The next morning, I tried to pretend everything was fine. I made coffee. I folded the laundry. I even set the table. But when I went to the kitchen, I noticed something new. The fridge had sticky notes on everything. Little yellow squares everywhere. Ethan's juice. Laura's yogurt. Eli's snacks. Every single thing had a name. Except mine. I just stood there, staring at it. Feeling smaller and smaller with each label. Later that day, I asked gently, Sweetheart, I saw the labels on the fridge. Should I put my name on anything? She didn't even look up from her phone. Oh, Mom, it's fine. You can use the eggs. I bought you some. Bottom shelf. Her tone was casual. Like she was talking to a tenant. I nodded. Of course. But inside, I felt something crack again. That evening, while I was washing dishes, I overheard them talking in the living room. I didn't mean to listen, but their voices carried. Ethan said, she needs to start paying. She can't just live here forever. And Laura replied, I know, but she's my mom. I feel bad. Then he said, feeling bad doesn't pay the bills. I dropped the sponge. My hands shook so hard that the water splashed onto the floor. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, whispering to myself, you're not a burden. You're not. But it felt like a lie. The following days were quiet. Too quiet. They barely spoke to me. Sometimes I'd hear them laugh together downstairs while I sat alone in my room, staring at the wall. I thought about moving out, but where would I go? My house had been closed up for months since Robert's death, and I couldn't bear the thought of being there alone. Still, every day something inside me was dying. It wasn't just sadness. It was humiliation. To live under your child's roof, to hear their laughter, to smell their cooking, and to know you're not part of it anymore. One evening, I decided to make dinner for everyone. Maybe, just maybe, we could feel like a family again. I made Robert's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary and garlic. I set the table with candles. I even placed a small vase of flowers in the center. When they came home, I smiled. Surprise. Dinner's ready. Laura looked uncomfortable. Ethan sighed. Oh, Mom, she said. You didn't have to. We already picked up takeout. They walked past me carrying white paper bags and cups of soda. I stood there, holding the carving knife, staring at the untouched table. Eli mumbled, smells good though, and went upstairs. That night, I ate alone. And something inside me, something that still believed love was unconditional, finally broke for good. I started packing my things quietly the next morning. Not all of it. Just enough. A few clothes, my medication, my photo albums, and Robert's wedding ring. Laura asked where I was going. I smiled. Just staying with a friend for a few days. She barely looked up. Okay, Mom. Don't forget the rent for next week. I nodded, even though I had no intention of paying. Because by then, I'd already decided something. I wasn't going to beg for love. Not anymore. When the taxi pulled up, I looked back one last time. The house that once represented hope now looked like a stranger's home. And I realized something so painful it nearly brought me to my knees. You can give someone everything. Your money, your years, your heart. And they can still make you feel like you owe them something. As we drove away, I whispered to myself, never again. The taxi stopped in front of my old house, the one Robert and I had built 40 years ago. The paint was peeling. The garden was overgrown. The windows were dusty. But it was ours. I stepped inside slowly. The floor creaked. The air smelled like dust and memory. And for the first time in months, I felt home. I sat on the floor, opened one of the photo albums, and traced my fingers over Robert's face. I'm here, love, I whispered. I came back. And then I wept. Not just for him. Not just for me. But for the part of my heart I'd lost somewhere between raising my daughter and realizing she no longer saw me as her mother. That night, as I lay on the floor with just a blanket, something strange happened. I felt peace. Not happiness. Not comfort. But peace. And I thought, maybe that's what healing really is. Not waiting for someone to come and love you again. But realizing, you can still love yourself, even after they don't. The next morning, I made tea on the old gas stove. The kettle whistled, and for a second, I could almost hear Robert humming in the background like he used to. And I smiled. Because I finally understood something I wish I'd known years ago. You can lose everything, your husband, your home, even your child's affection, and still wake up one morning and choose peace. But as I sipped my tea, I remembered something my lawyer had once told me years ago when we bought Laura's house. Something about the title. About how the deed was never fully transferred. And slowly, a thought began to form. A quiet, steady thought. Not of revenge. But of fairness, the kind they said they wanted. Maybe it was time to remind them whose name was really on that paper. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring through the dusty curtains of my old home. The house felt still. Like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if I was really there. I sat up slowly, my back stiff from sleeping on the floor. The blanket had slipped halfway off, and my hands were cold. But for the first time in months, I didn't wake to the sound of someone else's footsteps. No muffled laughter. No voices whispering downstairs. Just silence. Peaceful, heavy, mine. I boiled some water on the old stove, found a chipped mug, and made myself tea. The kind Robert used to make me every morning. 2 sugars. A little milk. And as I sat by the window, looking at the overgrown garden outside, I whispered, "All right, Robert. What now?" Because the truth was, I had no plan. No idea what came next. Just this ache in my chest that said, you can't go back. Not this time. Later that morning, I gathered my strength and walked to the drawer in the hallway, the one where we used to keep old documents. I dug through faded papers, old bills, and yellowed envelopes until I found a file labeled Hamilton Estate. Inside were copies of the house deeds. One was ours. The other, Laura's. I pulled it out, my hands trembling a little. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe I just needed to see proof that something, anything, still belonged to me. And then, there it was. My name. Still printed clearly on the title. Not hers. Not Ethan's. Mine. I froze. My heart began to race, and for the first time since the funeral, a spark lit inside me. Small, steady, fierce. Could it really be? I didn't trust myself to assume anything, so I called my lawyer, Mr. Dempsey. He'd helped Robert and me with the purchase years ago. He was surprised to hear from me. Mrs. Hamilton, he said warmly, I was just thinking about you the other day. How are you holding up? I've been better, I said softly. Listen, I need to ask you something about the house we helped our daughter buy. Do you still have the paperwork? He shuffled around for a moment. Yes, the one on Cedar Grove? Let me check. There was a pause. Then his voice came back, curious. Yes, I've got it. What's your concern? I swallowed. Whose name is listed as owner? He hesitated, then said carefully, well, technically you are. You and your late husband. Your daughter and son-in-law are residents, but the property was never transferred. The deed remains under your ownership. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the sunlight glinting off the rim of my mug. So, I said slowly, you're telling me that house still legally belongs to me? He replied, yes. Unless you've signed anything since then, which, judging by your tone, I doubt you have. I let out a shaky laugh. No, I haven't. Well, he said kindly, then it's yours. Mine. The word felt strange on my tongue, like a language I hadn't spoken in years. I thanked him, hung up the phone, and sat there for a long time, just breathing. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of something deeper. Clarity. That evening, I walked through each room of the house. The floors were dusty, the curtains yellowed with age, but I felt Robert everywhere. In the creak of the hallway. In the way the light fell across the kitchen counter. In the photo frames still hanging slightly crooked in the living room. And I realized, this was where I was meant to be. Not in a stranger's house. Not paying rent to my own child. But here, in the place where love had once lived and never really died. Over the next few days, I started cleaning. I scrubbed the floors. Opened the windows. Beat the dust out of the rugs. Each movement felt like reclaiming something. Piece by piece, breath by breath. And with every room I cleaned, I could hear Robert's voice in my head again. You've still got fight in you, Ellie. Don't let them make you small. I smiled through tears. I'm trying, love, I whispered. I really am. A week later, I made a decision. It wasn't one I made out of revenge. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about fairness. The kind they had been so proud of preaching to me. I went to the realtor's office the next morning. Her name was Claire, a polite young woman with kind eyes and firm handshakes. What can I help you with today, Mrs. Hamilton? She asked. I smiled softly. I'd like to sell a house. She blinked. Of course. Which one? The one at 417 Cedar Grove. She typed the address quickly. Then she looked up at me. Oh, that's a beautiful property. Are you sure? I nodded. Quite sure. And just like that, the process began. I didn't tell Laura. I didn't tell Ethan. Weeks passed quietly. I went to the post office. Signed forms. Took calls. All the while, I could picture their faces if they found out. But I didn't smile at the thought. I didn't gloat. There was nothing sweet about it. It just felt necessary. Because sometimes, the only way to teach someone the weight of their choices is to let them feel the ground shift beneath their own feet. One afternoon, while I was watering the small plants I'd bought for the windowsill, the phone rang. Mrs. Hamilton? Yes. This is Claire. We've received an offer. Full price. The buyer wants to close quickly. I closed my eyes. That's good news, I said quietly. She hesitated. Should I move forward? I took a deep breath. Yes, Claire. Please do. When I hung up, I just stood there. The kettle whistled softly behind me, and I realized it was done. The house that had once symbolized betrayal was finally out of my hands. Or rather, back into them. A month later, I hired a moving truck. I told the movers to meet me at Cedar Grove. I wore a beige cardigan, the one Robert always said made me look soft and warm. When I arrived, Laura was outside trimming the hedge. She looked surprised. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I smiled faintly. "Just taking care of a few things." Ethan came out holding a beer. "You didn't call first." "I didn't think I needed to," I said calmly. They both looked uneasy. Then the moving truck pulled up behind me. Laura frowned. "What is this?" The movers began unloading boxes. "Ma'am," one of them called out, "should we start inside?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Start with the living room." Ethan stepped forward, voice rising. "Whoa, hold on. What the hell is going on?" I turned to him slowly. "I sold the house." Silence. The color drained from Laura's face. "You what?" "You heard me," I said softly. "I sold it." Her voice cracked. "You can't just do that." I met her eyes. Calm, steady. "Oh, but I can. It's mine, Laura. Always was." Ethan's face turned red. "This is insane. We've been living here for 5 years. And you've had 5 years," I said gently. "That's more than enough time to show a little gratitude." Laura shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Mom, please. We didn't mean." I cut her off. "You meant every word. You called it fair. You labeled your fridge, your food, your space. You charged me rent. And all I did was listen." I stepped closer, my voice trembling but strong. "You wanted things to be clear. So now they are." For a long moment, no one spoke. Ethan stormed inside, muttering under his breath. Laura just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because the woman standing in front of her wasn't the mother who quietly paid their bills, who smiled through tears, who accepted humiliation in silence. No. This was someone else. Someone who had learned that love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. The new owners were moving in the following week. When the day came for Laura and Ethan to leave, I didn't go. I couldn't. I stayed in my own house, sitting by the window with my cup of tea. Claire called to confirm the sale had gone through. "The funds have cleared," she said. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hamilton." I thanked her, hung up, and looked out at the garden where the first new rosebud had started to bloom. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. That evening, I sat with my checkbook open, staring at the numbers. I could finally fix the roof, paint the walls, maybe even take a trip, somewhere quiet, where the sea could wash the noise of everything away. But before I did any of that, I did one small thing. I took an envelope, wrote Laura's name on it, and slipped in a short note. It said, "You once told me you wanted fairness. Life gave it to you. Be careful what you teach your children, they might learn it too well." I mailed it the next morning. That night, I sat by the window again, the moon shining on the garden. And I whispered, "We did it, Robert. We're free." It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. And in that quiet moment, I realized, sometimes you have to lose everything to remember who you were before the world made you smaller. You know what's strange? When you finally stand up for yourself. There's no music, no applause, no sudden burst of happiness, just silence. Quiet, still, heavy silence. That's what I felt the morning after the sale was finalized. I woke up early, made myself tea, and stood by the window watching the light stretch across the walls. It looked softer that morning, warmer somehow. Maybe it was the paint I'd finally had redone, or maybe it was me. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't hurt. It didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. After Laura and Ethan moved out, I didn't hear from them for weeks. Not a call. Not a message. Nothing. Part of me expected it. Another part of me dreaded it. Because no matter how deeply someone wounds you, when they're your child, you never stop waiting for them to call. Every time the phone rang, I'd catch myself hoping it was her. And when it wasn't, I'd tell myself, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow kept coming and going. So, I stopped waiting. Instead, I started living again. It began small. Washing the windows, scrubbing the tiles, trimming the rose bushes in the garden. The same ones Robert had planted 30 years ago. It hurt at first. My knees ached. My back protested. But every little thing I did made this house more alive. I brought in new curtains, pale cream with lace edges. I bought a second-hand armchair from the thrift store, soft and worn, just how I liked it. And one rainy afternoon, I went down to the animal shelter. I didn't plan to. I was just walking past, and something drew me in. There was this little orange cat sitting by the window, staring right at me. He had the saddest eyes I'd ever seen. The volunteer said he'd been found on the street, hungry, scared, and alone. Something about him felt familiar. I crouched down, looked into those eyes, and whispered, "I know the feeling." An hour later, I was filling out adoption papers. I named him Sunny, because he brought a kind of light I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The days started to fill up again. Every morning, I'd make tea, sit by the window, and read a few pages of a book while Sunny purred on my lap. I joined a little reading group at the library, just a handful of women around my age, all with stories of their own. Some were widows like me. Some were divorced. Some had children who lived halfway across the world. We talked about books at first. But soon, it became something else, a circle of quiet understanding. A place where no one had to pretend. One afternoon, after the meeting, I told them what had happened. About Laura. About the rent. The fridge. The sale. There was a long silence. Then one of the women rose, touched my hand and said, "Don't carry shame that isn't yours, dear. You did what you had to do." And for the first time, I believed it. Months passed. The seasons changed. The flowers bloomed, then faded. The ache in my chest softened into something almost gentle. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. Just wiser. Grief, I realized, doesn't always come from death. Sometimes, it comes from the people who are still alive. The ones who look you in the eye and make you feel invisible. But healing comes from remembering that invisibility isn't the same as worthlessness. Then one day it happened. It was a Tuesday. Rainy. I'd just finished grocery shopping when I saw her. Laura. She was standing near the bakery section, holding a basket and looking thinner than I remembered. Her hair was tied back messily. Her face looked tired, not just physically, but tired from the inside. For a second, I froze. My instinct was to turn around, to hide behind the nearest shelf. But something in me whispered, no, not this time. So I took a slow breath, walked toward her, and said softly, "Laura." She turned around. When her eyes met mine, I saw the recognition hit her, and then the guilt. "Mom," she whispered. Her lips trembled. We just stood there, staring at each other, while the world kept moving around us. Carts rolling, people chatting, children laughing. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 10 seconds. Maybe a lifetime. Then she said, "You look good." I smiled gently. "Thank you." There was a pause. And then the words she'd been holding back finally slipped out. "I'm sorry." Just that. 2 words. Barely more than a whisper. But they cracked something open inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just said, "I know." She nodded, eyes glistening. I messed up. Badly. I looked at her. My daughter, my once little girl who used to braid my hair and fall asleep on my lap. And I saw not a villain, but a lost woman who'd let life harden her. And I realized. I wasn't angry anymore. "I forgive you," I said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll forget." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I understand. I reached out and touched her hand. I hope you're doing okay. She nodded. We're managing. It's been hard. But we're okay. I squeezed her fingers gently. Good. And then I said the thing I'd never imagined I'd have the strength to say. Take care of yourself, Laura. I turned, pushed my cart toward the checkout, and didn't look back. That night, when I got home, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The air smelled like wet earth and lilacs. Sonny curled up on my lap, his purring soft against my hand. And for a while I just sat there, breathing, listening, feeling. I thought about Laura, about how life has a way of teaching us through pain, the same way fire hardens clay. I wasn't sure if she'd ever come back. But I knew this much: if she did, I'd open the door. Not because she deserved it, but because I finally understood something that took me a lifetime to learn. Forgiveness isn't about giving someone else peace. It's about giving it to yourself. Weeks turned into months again. My days grew simple but full. I started painting. Nothing fancy, just flowers and sunsets. I planted new roses, started baking again, even laughed with neighbors on the porch like I used to years ago. And sometimes, when I'd sit alone with my tea, I'd feel Robert beside me. Not as a ghost, not as memory, but as warmth. Like sunlight through an open window. One evening, just before sunset, I walked through the garden with my bare feet touching the grass. The air was golden. Still. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We did it, love. We made it. Because we had." Not in the way we'd imagined when we built this house together, but in a quieter, truer way. I'd survived the kind of heartbreak that leaves no scars you can show, only the kind you carry in silence. And I'd come out of it. Softer. Not weaker. Softer. The kind of soft that bends, not breaks. The kind that knows its worth without needing to shout. Before I went back inside, I glanced toward the horizon and said one last thing. Not to Robert, not even to Laura, but to myself. Peace doesn't come from being loved by everyone. It comes from loving yourself enough to walk away from those who don't. And that's what I did. I walked away. Not bitter. Not broken. Just free.